everybody, I'm Katie Pavlich from townhall.com, and today we are at Murphy's, a grand Irish pub, and I am with the former White House Press Secretary, Sean Spicer. Thank you so much for taking the time. We are here to talk about his new book, The Briefing, Politics, the Press, and the President. It comes out soon. We're excited for your launch. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for coming to Murphy's. Not only a great Irish bar, but a great Patriots bar.
Most importantly, a great Patriots bar. We are both Irish, so we thought this would be the perfect venue to talk about Sean's new book. So going into the 2016 presidential election, you had plenty of experience.
Right.
You talk about in your book how you couldn't get hired initially for a job in D.C. because you didn't have experience
Right.
on your resume.
And that's why
you don't have experience, you can't get experience,
Exactly.
right? But going into the 2016 election, you had enough experience under your belt that you knew what it was going to take for a Republican to beat Hillary Clinton, presumably, as the Democratic nominee.
Right.
Talk about the primary process, how exciting that was with as many candidates as Republicans had, and then transition us into Donald Trump, who many people never believed could win the primary,
Right.
winning the primary, and then ultimately going on to win the presidency.
So the thing that's so fascinating is about last cycle was how unconventional it was in so many ways. We had 17 unbelievable candidates running, and those are just the ones that you've heard of, right? You've got all these second and third and fourth tier candidates that are on their ballot, but those are the names you knew. And so we had instituted several reforms, both in terms of the primary process and the debate process, to try to give our candidate and eventual nominee the advantages they needed heading into a general. Nobody could have predicted how that cycle went in terms of the debates, the number of candidates, the back and forth, and also the caliber, right? So a lot of times if you look back through history, on both sides, you'll have sort of a top tier and then sort of a hanger-on version, if you will. We had 17 individuals. I would argue almost every one of them legitimately could have been the nominee at some point or another, in terms of perception, not necessarily when you look at the stages of a bit. Heading into that election, I think you could have made a case for almost every one of them on how they could have won. So here we are after the Indiana primary after May, and Trump becomes the presumptive nominee. And he had run, by all accounts, the most unconventional operation in modern presidential history in either party. And so it was fascinating because the RNC normally is a resource provider to the nominee.
Right.
We figure out what they need in terms of bodies and resources and help them put together. The Trump campaign had no fundraising operation. It had no research operation. It had a very scant press operation. And it provided us an unbelievable opportunity to play an outsized role with the campaign that we had never dreamed we would play.
All right, so Sean, the environment in 2016 was an interesting one politically, especially for the Republican Party. Trump was this outsider who was taking over everything, winning primaries, winning debates. Was there a certain moment where you knew, watching all of this inside and outside the room, he was going to be the one who just stole the hearts of Americans and was going to win the White House?
I think anecdotally you started to hear people who had not voted or been involved in politics suddenly engage in the political system in a way that was fascinating to us. The other thing that's interesting is that events are like yard signs. You see them all over the place, but that's never an indication of how a candidate's doing. In Trump's case, though, these rallies were unbelievable. They were drawing people in that had not been engaged, and we had the data on these individuals. They were not people that generally had been engaged in politics before, and they were massive. And you realize these people were driving to a venue, waiting in line just to catch a glimpse and hear what the guy had to say. That was a dynamic that we've never seen before. Normally in a political year, you would run ads, you'd send out flyers and say, hey, the candidate's coming to town, please join him at this event in this venue. In Trump's case, he would send out a single tweet, and you get tens of thousands of people showing up at a venue just to see the guy for 30 minutes.
Right. Yeah, incredible. Yeah. What would be the number one thing that you learned from the Trump campaign in the primary that you then could apply to all of the years of experience that you had as someone who knew how to manage campaigns, running campaigns, and how to win them?
It's a great question, but the reality is I'm not sure, and I talk about this in the book, that you're going to see, part of it was about the candidate. He drew crowds and attention that I don't think anyone I see getting it again. Now, obviously, no one saw Donald Trump coming, so you never know who's going to be it. But the way he ran his campaign and the outsized presence that he has and had is not something that I think we'll have again. So if I were advising another candidate in the future, I would say, look, the one thing that Trump has that makes him unbelievably unique is the authenticity factor, right? So everybody who tries to emulate Trump are missing the fundamental point, which is that he is who he is. He doesn't apologize for it clearly. He says what he means, and I think that's what makes him unique. Where candidates are sometimes misreading the tea leaves right now is they're trying to figure out, oh, I'll just say what he said.
Right.
The difference is that he can only say what he says because there's a level of authenticity that goes along with that.
Yeah, we've seen a number of candidates try to emulate some of the Trump tactics, and it hasn't worked out so well for them. But let's fast forward to election night 2016.
Right.
I remember seeing you in New York City outside of Fox News, and you handed me a pile of research that the RNC had put together, and you were so confident that you guys were going to win based on the turnout numbers that you had in places like Florida. So talk about your attitude going into that night and what it was like to be in New York with Donald Trump when they called it for him to be the president, the next president of the United States.
Yeah, I think the first part can't be overstated. We had transformed the role of the RNC to be a data and people organization, meaning that instead of stockpiling our money and putting it on TV ads at the end, we had put people in the field to make contacts with voters, and then all of that data that we compiled through human interaction and through other sort of online ways that we could find out something about somebody, or we could buy information on them, compile a voter profile. We knew, not because of polling, but because of data, that we had the votes that we needed. Were we confident that we were going to win? No. We knew we could do it and we could close it. The same trend, and we talk about this extensively in the book, that we saw in all of these battleground states was present, and we knew that the trend was going our way. Were we confident that we could make it all up? We weren't sure, but we felt pretty good that that same trend existed through every battleground state, and if we could get those people turned out, that we would win. And so to your bigger question on election night, you don't ever run a race, whether it's for student council or for president, that you don't think you can win.
Yeah.
You don't spend that many hours. You don't get that involved and that passionate. But you always have that little, until you see the results go up. And watching those states fall. And it wasn't just the states, that we would get county reports and would say, okay, we're overperforming here, she's underperforming there. And you're going, oh my gosh, it's real. Yeah. And there is something that is undescribable in terms of the feeling that you have when it's not that if you win and you know you're going to win, you feel good. If you lose and you know you're going to lose, you still feel bad, but you kind of knew it. When you win as big as we did, right? And people have to keep in mind that we were not given a chance. Everyone kept thinking, is there a path to 270? And it was like, yes, if you get Maine's second congressional district, you can, and you've got all these math wizards trying to play electoral map. To get 306 and win states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Iowa, all of these states have been elusive to Republican candidates since the mid-'80s or late 80s, was unbelievable.
Well, and as you talk about in the book, you guys were campaigning right up to Election Day in places like Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I remember watching the coverage and seeing Wisconsin go down, and all of a sudden it was like the blue wall is coming down. The blue wall that the Democrats were depending on for Hillary Clinton was crumbling, and everybody was just fascinated by watching all of this happen and play out live. It was incredible.
And again, I don't know that I'll ever have a night like that again in terms of you have to calibrate it with your expectations. So we thought we could win, but then to see, those other states come in that manner was literally euphoric.
Well, on that note, I think we will take our Irish beverages and cheer. Thank you, Sean
Thank you
Spicer, for taking the time, and good luck with the book. Again, it is The Briefing by Sean Spicer, out on what day?
July 24th.
And where can people buy it?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Local bookstores. It's obviously available for pre-order wherever books are sold.
Well, best of luck.
Thank you.
Irish luck.